So let me try to be operational, which means I talk about experiments. What you see here is a telescope. It's a telescope on the Canary Island of Tenerife, where we do experiments. And we are not on the Canary Islands for the reasons you think we are there. It's not for the cheese and for the wine. We are up on these islands because we can do long-distance quantum communication to test some of these ideas. Here is the paradigmatic example, as they say, for the public discussion of what some people say the absurd, or Schrodinger liked to call it, Erwin Schrodinger, Austrian Nobel Prize winner for quantum mechanics, like to call the bizarre consequences of quantum mechanics. It's Schrödinger's cat. And I just go through it a little bit because there's a lot of misunderstanding what it might mean. The idea is that you have a radioactive atom. You were introduced to radioactivity already. And this radioactive atom is one atom. It might decay within the next hour or not decay, with 50-50 chance. Then if it decays, it's registered by a Geiger counter. Then this means that a hammer falls down and it breaks a glass container which contains poison that would kill a cat which is in the same container as the rest of the device. On the other hand, if the atom does not decay, the cat will be happy and alive. Now, quantum mechanics says that after this hour, the atom is not decayed or not decayed. It's in a superposition of decayed and not decayed. And if quantum physics holds for everything in the world, then in the end, the cat should also be in the superposition of decayed and not decayed. So it is often said that the cat is both dead and alive, and people say that we never see things like that, so the whole idea must be crazy. It's a little bit more subtle. The cat is in a superposition of both dead and alive, which means that it has the possibility, when you observe it, to be dead and alive, and each one with half and half probability. But this probability is then completely random. That's the important point. It is random in a sense. This decay of the radioactive atom is random in a new sense. It's in a sense that we know that for the individual quantum event, it's not just that we don't know the cause, there is no cause. Einstein didn't like that. He expressed his discomfort about randomness, and he said, in any case, I'm convinced that God does not play dice with the universe. Here's a die, a single die, and you saw a die before. We believe in classical physics that the motion of a die can be described, at least in principle, by deterministic laws. So if you know everything, how I turn my hand and so on, you can predict in a specific case what the number will give. Or at least it is possible to make up a story which explains what will come out. Now, in quantum mechanics, this is not possible. It's not possible to make up such a story if these were quantum dice. So the randomness is one of the pieces of information. This new quality of randomness for individual events is one of the pieces of information I want you to take home with you. Actually, it is said that Niels Bohr told Einstein after this statement, stop telling God how to run the world. Okay. The next piece of information I want you to take home is the notion of entanglement, or in German, Verschränkung. I do not know whether there must be a Swedish word, but... okay, you have to say that. Okay. Someone flattening. Someone flattening. Oh, interesting. Anyway, so the idea is that you have two particles which interact at some time, and then they fly apart, like that. And then in quantum mechanics, they remain connected in an interesting way forever, until you do the first observation on them. This means that if you observe one, you get some result, like you ask it, how fast are you flying along? And then you know that the other one is also flying along with a certain speed, like the sum of the two must be the same, you know? One is flying this way, while the other is flying this way. But the point is that before you do the observation here, none of the two had a well-defined speed. This was, and the result is completely random. Completely random. So this gives a random result, and the other one, no matter how far it is away, gives the corresponding result, which exactly corresponds to the first one. So how can two completely random events be correlated to each other? Einstein didn't like it, and he called it spooky action at a distance. Erwin Schrödinger signified the situation again, and this is a way how to think about it. You have two dice. You throw two dice, if they are entangled, and they give the same number, 6. And you take them again, put them back in your cup, throw them again. Now they both give 3. Throw them again. Now they both give 1. Okay? Now, if this happens, there are only 2 possible explanations. One explanation is that maybe there's an internal mechanism in each of the die which defines now, you know, same mechanism, what the result should be. Or maybe the two talk to each other. There's communication. And the point is, with modern experiments, this is a story which was actually finished last year. With modern experiments, we can exclude both explanations. So you have the two dice doing the same, but it's not that they talk to each other, it's not a hidden mechanism, it's just the way the world is. Here's a small advertisement for Austria. You should visit Austria. If you have not been there, you should come. That's the grave of Erwin Schrödinger in Alpbach, in Tyrol. Nice, beautiful village. And this is Schrödinger's equation. And I show it because Schrödinger's equation describes a lot. It describes solid-state physics. It describes how the computer chips work in your mobile phone. It describes the evolution of the early universe. It describes the evolution of the propagation of electrons and therefore chemistry and so on. And what's amazing in physics, and I want you to appreciate that these are only 5 symbols. And 5 symbols can be extremely rich and describe nearly the whole universe. This is really magic to me. Now here's a picture of where we do this kind of entanglement experiments over long distances between the Canary Islands of La Palma and Tenerife. And the point simply is to test these kind of things for future communication. Here's again the station which you saw. Now, so I told you 3 fundamental concepts actually, just to repeat. Superposition, randomness, and entanglement. Okay? Now, when people started to work on this, and I was very, very lucky to work on this in the 70s and so on, we just did it out of curiosity. I just want to see this in the laboratory. It was not possible to do it before because the technology did not exist. And to our big surprise, it turns out that this might be useful for something. We talk about quantum computers, etc. One of the applications is teleportation. Here is the idea of teleportation in science fiction. You know this famous quote, "Beam me up, Scotty." You know why teleportation was invented in the film? I don't know who knows that here. It was to save costs. Because to simulate the landing on a different planet all the time and the start, that costs a lot of money. And beaming up, beaming down is very cheap. You know, it doesn't cost much. But there was a problem. You know, the idea in this old idea, the idea is not so silly. You know, you scan the original, you scan the information, you transfer the information to the receiving location, and then you reassemble the original using the information. There's a problem. Heisenberg's relation, which you heard already, says that this is not possible. If you only have one object, one system, Heisenberg relation says that you can only know, either the position or the momenta of the electrons which make up your body and so on. You cannot know the whole thing. So what the people in Star Trek did was they invented the Heisenberg compensator. Right? And there's a very classic, it's one of these a press conference, Gene Roddenberry, who was the mastermind, was asked, how does the Heisenberg compensator work? And he gave the best possible answer. He said, very well, thank you. Now, I mention this because it's fun, but also mention it because, like in medicine, very often the cure is related to the cause, to the problem. And here too, the problem that teleportation doesn't work is quantum mechanics, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, but the cure comes from quantum mechanics, namely use entanglement. Okay? So here's how teleportation works in the experiment. Basically, what you do now is you have to circumvent Heisenberg's principle, which says that you cannot know both at the same time. So we have to invent a method, and this was done by 6 colleagues internationally in the early 90s. We have to invent a method to transfer the information from A to B without determining it, without measuring it. You don't have to, nobody has to know the information which you send from A to B. You just have to make sure that it is sent from A to B. And that is what entanglement does. I don't want to go into the details, but the basic idea is that you take an entangled pair and you have an input state which you want to transfer, and you entangle the one you want to send away with one of the pieces of the entangled pair, and lo and behold, the information moves over in a sense without being determined. So Heisenberg has to be silent here. He cannot say anything about it. Now, all this is not just playing games. It's actually conceptually interesting because you can transfer information in a situation where you don't have a connection at that moment between the two stations. This is actually conceptually quite remarkable. All this is not just fantasy. We are collaborating, for example, here with the Chinese Academy of Sciences to put a satellite into space to do this kind of things between different stations, because entanglement is one of the ideas to do secure communication. The catchword is quantum cryptography. You can basically, I told you that, remember the two dice that show the same results, but each result is random. So you have two sequences of random numbers if you do these measurements. You do the measurements on photons now, for example, particles of light. You measure the polarization. So you get two identical random sequences. And you can use one random sequence to encode information, and the other one has the same sequence. He can decode the information. And the point is that the code, which are the random sequences, does not have to be transported from A to B, because it comes into existence at both locations at the same time because of Einstein's spooky action at a distance. Well, that's actually a quite interesting situation, that a funny philosophical idea leads to a possible application. Another application is, you can imagine that this teleportation, that this is the output of a quantum computer, a future quantum computer. This is the input into a future quantum computer. So many people think that teleportation is the method how future quantum computers will talk to each other. Now here is a picture of I mentioned the word quantum computer. This is a big field of development now all over the world. There's lots of, again, to my complete surprise, and many people's complete surprise, these ideas are now being applied. A quantum computer uses superposition. In some versions, it uses the randomness of the individual event, and it uses entanglement. I want to say in a nutshell, why is a quantum, so a quantum computer would then use individual atoms, strings of atoms to encode information, and the interactions between the atoms as the way how the information is processed, for example, or it uses photons, particles of light, or whatever, any kind of quantum system. Why is a quantum computer so much richer than a classical computer? If you think of a classical computer, the basic element of information is the bit. Everybody knows now what a bit is. It is either 0 or 1, and you represent it in the computer in some way, either as some voltage, you know, or some magnetic state or whatever. And a bit is either 0 or 1. If it is something else and the computer is broken, you have to buy a new computer of 5 minutes, okay? Now, the point is a quantum computer can be, each bit can be in a superposition of 0 and 1. And this is much, much richer than just a classical bit. And furthermore, the different bits can be entangled to each other. So what you do to one has some effect on the others. And these 2 points are basically the reason why a quantum computer actually will be able to solve problems which a classical computer will never be able to solve within the lifetime of the universe. This is quite interesting. Now the status is that in the last 2 or 3 years, suddenly the serious companies became interested, like Google or Microsoft, and they are putting significant amounts into the development of these devices. China is putting a lot of money into this, and just a few weeks ago, the European Union decided to put 1 billion euros into this kind of development. So this is an ongoing race, and it's very interesting. It's an ongoing race because nobody knows how the final quantum computer will look like. So we still have to do a lot of groundbreaking work, but everyone feels that there will be a quantum computer. I personally am convinced that in the future information technology will be quantum because there is no fundamental reason why it should not work. There are many, many challenges, and it will take many clever young students and so on to work on this, but there's no fundamental reason why it should not work. So this is a fantastic situation right now. It's one of the most interesting fields in at least in physics going on, with the fundamental questions still being debated and being open. What is really the meaning? Why do we have superposition, for example? Why do we have randomness? There are hints that the way how to consider these issues is to consider information as a fundamental constituent of the universe, which is actually quite an interesting idea. That information might be more basic than you know, materialistic concepts and so on. And if you have such an idea, then you can explain entanglement. You can understand randomness in a new way, which means that in the end it means that, for example, the information which characterizes 2 systems transcends all limitations of space and time. This is nearly a poetic statement. So I come to my end now, to the end of my talk, not my end, I hope. So I would like to thank you very much for your attention. That's a picture of my group on the roof of our institute. Back there is a telescope, which we use for some of these experiments. We call it Hedy Lamarr Quantum Communication Telescope. Hedy Lamarr was a famous actress. She came from Vienna. She had to emigrate because of the Nazis. She was forced to emigrate. And in 1943, she had a patent about cryptography, frequency hopping encoding, it was called. It was a very interesting, serious patent, and just to memorize her, we called our telescope Hedy Lamarr Quantum Communication Telescope. With that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention.